I'm based in Bernalla and work as a consultant, and one of my areas of consultancy is facilitation, and that's what brings me here today. I guess today to me seems like a bit of an opportunity. It's an opportunity to take the time out of the busy roles that we all have in various parts of this thing that we call the research, development and extension system. It's an opportunity to take a bit more of a helicopter view of what is going on in that system, and to hear some of the trials that have been going on that are really challenging our current practice in that system. And we're here to sort of really think about what are those trials pointing towards? What are they showing us that we can, the lessons learnt that we can take on board, but also where do we go from here? So that's essentially our discussion today. It's an exciting time for any project to come to the reporting point. I know some of the trials are still going, but it is an opportunity to begin this synthesis process of synthesising the experiences and the findings of those trials into some sort of collective wisdom on what we've found and what that experience has taught us and where do we go next. In your packs, you'll find a copy of the agenda and process for today. So essentially, we're going to start with a bit of contexting by Ruth and by Ian, and then we're going to hear from each of the trials. We've given them an extremely hard task, and that is to give us a sense of what they did and what they found in 20 minutes. So we'll see how they go with that challenge. From there, we're going to, as a group, use your wisdom, your experience from where you sit in the R&D system to distill out what you think are some of those key learnings and some of the impacts that it might have on our approaches and practices. And then we're going to do, after lunch, a where to from here type discussion. All right, so I guess today is an opportunity. We really want to share with you the findings and experience of the trials and then really tap into your experience. We are a relatively large group, so I guess what I'm asking from you today is working with me just to ensure that everyone does get an opportunity to have a say and bring their thinking to the table. So, and because it's a short period of time, it just might be useful to keep in mind to stay succinct so that others can have a say. We do want to listen to a full range of views, so it's not that you have to agree with everyone at your table. We're interested in the diversity of thinking as well. And most importantly, what is important from your perspective does get recorded, so we are able to get a record of today. Just on that, we are being recorded, so there is some filming and some photography that will go on through the day. In your pack is a consent form, so if you're able to fill that out, leave it on the table and we'll collect that up at lunchtime. I also want to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on where we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and wish to welcome any Aboriginal people that are present with us today. In terms of housekeeping, we've got toilets through that way. If you want a reminder about your phone to put it onto silent, then here is your reminder. And I think that's about it. So we might get started. So to kick us off in terms of giving us the context for today, I'm going to ask Ian to start that process.
Cath, and welcome everybody to what's a very exciting day for the project and particularly the trials, which are the key focus of today. So context-wise, I'm aiming to just give you an overview of the project, the trials and where they fit in within the project, and give you an idea of the many components of the project and start you thinking about how they might gel together. So that's been quite a challenge to get the things to gel together. Where are we? Just a little bit about the project origin. So where has the project come from? So it's nearly 3 years ago that this project started, and the environment's similar, yet it's changed a fair bit in that time. So a couple of points about the environment that existed when the project developed and as the project has moved along. So there was a trend, and still is, towards increased private sector involvement in RD&E, in agriculture. So most industries have seen that. Government roles have changed quite a bit. So in the government sense, we've seen a lot of us can remember one-to-one extension offered by government. A lot of discussion about productivity extension. That's changed a little bit, quite a bit. So we're now looking at governments having a more strategic role, focusing on activities such as biosecurity, animal welfare, and broader agricultural issues and agricultural trends. The RDCs are always looking to share information about how they work with the private sector, and they all work a little bit differently. So the RDCs were informally sharing and sometimes formally sharing information. So this project provided an opportunity for RDCs to collaborate, and we'll have a look at who the collaborators are in a minute, in this space of private sector extension. The 2015 Agricultural White Paper Initiative, one of the outcomes of that initiative was a smarter farming and RD&E priorities focus. And so this project fitted in nicely with that and gelled with that emphasis in the program. So the Department of Ag and Water Resources Rural R&D for Profit program, which is where this project is funded, offered RD&E support. So an RDC had to be involved in the application, but other agencies as well, to support continued innovation in Australia's primary industries. So therefore we had an environment that suited the type of application we were looking for. And the application's focus, so the very specific focus for this project, is to identify practical proposals to stimulate private sector extension services, particularly to fill current gaps. So that's the environment that existed. That's the environment in which the project is operated. So let's have a quick look at who the project partners are. And there are some key project partners left off. These are the investing project partners. So we've got the University of Melbourne. So Ruth Nettle will be up here in a minute. Ruth Nettle and team are involved in the research and obviously committed funding and in kind to the project. Meat and Livestock Australia, another key investor, and RDC. Dairy Australia, who have an investment and also project manage the project, so that's my role, and I work with Dairy Australia. The Cotton Research and Development Corporation are involved as an investor and partner. Australian Pork Limited, Sugar Research Australia, Horticulture Innovation Australia. So there are 6 RDCs involved in that. There are also 2 state governments, so DPI New South Wales are involved in the project, and also the Department of or DECIDA in Victoria, or Agriculture Victoria, are involved as well. And when I say involved, they're involved in the steering committee, management committee, and they've supported the trials and the project in general. So let's have a quick look at the components of the trial. I know this is going over old ground for many of you, but for some of you, it just gives you the context for the day to see where the project's come from and where it's going. So we've got a project that focuses very strongly on being collaborative. So we've got collaborative partners and governance. We've got a project which is adaptive, so There have been tweaks and changes and a few turns along the way, but also all that's happened within the research framework that's been designed and the project guidelines. It's cross-sectoral, as you saw, and the aim is to have an increased understanding of private sector engagement in RD&E. So at the end, we're looking to make some recommended actions and some continued improvement in that sector. And that's the aim of the project. So the bit that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's intentional, is that there is another big partner in this project, and that is the private sector, which includes producers, but the private advisory sector have provided a lot of input into the trials, and you'll see that as the trial activity is presented today. But they've also been involved in some of the design of the programs and a lot of the advice that we've had in designing both the research and the project. So you'll see where that fits in along the way, and Ruth will talk about some of those consultations. Okay, so what's happened briefly, we've got collaborative governance, so all those partners that we mentioned, including the Department of Agriculture and Water Resources, are involved in that collaborative governance of the project. So these are the early days. Jumped in and did a quick lit review of the project, so that involved not only the partners and not only Australian agriculture and the Australian private sector, it also looked at overseas literature and interviews. So that's informed the project along the way. Very early on, we developed some rigorous M&E frameworks, and also a little bit into the project, cost-benefit analysis. So they're very important in informing the project, and they're all based on the aims and the outcomes that we're attempting to get from the project. So very important, and we've got some of the M&E and cost-benefit analysis people here with us today who've been involved in, or are involved in, developing that and running it. We've got a communications framework, so some of you, I hope all of you, are involved in a newsletter that comes out from this project. As well as the newsletter, there's a website. All those details will be in your pack. So hook on and jump on. There's social media, etc., and more developments continuing. So forums, farmer and advisor. So to inform the project and in turn the trials, a number of forums have been run. Regional forums in 4 states with people from other states also engaged to be involved, and so that included advisors and producers. So very important to get their perspectives, and they've informed and in fact determined in some way what the trials are about and what some of the research is about. So in those early days we got a lot of information then. So that was probably throughout 2016, the regional forums. We have an expert panel, of which I think 4 of the 7 members are here today, and you'll meet them throughout the day. So they counsel the project, mentor the project, and focus on specific items that we as a project would like them to focus on. And right now they're focusing on something that you guys are going to be talking about today, and that's the 8 options for action. So you'll find them scattered around the room, and Steve Coates, the facilitator of the expert panel, is here, and he might introduce the expert panel later on. So that's a group that's been imperative to I suppose aligning us with some of those shifts in other countries and historically in Australia and new ways of thinking. We've done national surveys. Ruth will talk about these later. So we've done national surveys of farmers and advisors. So roughly everyone who was involved in the regional forums was involved in some of that input, but also roughly 1,000 cross-sectoral producers, farmers, and I think Ruth, having a guess here, about 650 advisors as well. Pretty close to that. Yep. Okay. So that's, again, they've had input into how the trial has developed and designed. We've got, and Ruth will briefly talk about these, we've got some training modules, again, advised by the forums and the private sector. We've got 8 online learning modules which have been piloted by people from the private sector and also the public sector. Ruth will give us a rundown on those. We've got the 4 trials. I'm not going to say too much at all, Jana and Ruth, because I don't want to say anything, but just to show you, if you observe that, they're very much an important part of this project. So there is a big project, and the trials are very much shining a light on 4 aspects that have been agreed upon, not just by the research team, but by advisors and producers across the country and RDCs. So that's been really important to make them relevant. And of course we've got in the trials we've got the private sector involved along with the team. So you'll meet all them later. National forums. So we had a forum in conjunction with RERDIC or Agri-Futures Australia in 2016 that again informed our processes. In 2017 we had a forum in Melbourne. So that was a larger forum than this, so more than double what we've got here. But that was the intent was to gather more information there at that stage and to spread the word about the project a little. Whereas today's very much more focused around targeting people who have had some touch with the project or some touch with the topic and of private sector extension, and also are involved in helping us make decisions moving forward from here. So there's other research going on. There's some social network analysis, etc., and a few other components of the project. So if you look there, that's pretty much what the project is right now. What's happening? Obviously the trials, and today a big day for us, and I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts and your comments about what the trials are and how we might move forward. The modules, international comparison going on at the moment. The expert panel leading that. So there's a comparison with private sector trends in other countries, and that's you'll be involved in some of that discussion today. Training modules, which we just mentioned, 8 training modules that Ruth will give you a quick oversight about where they came from and the intent of those. The cost-benefit analysis. So we're very keen to actually, it's hard work. So our cost-benefit analysis person is in the room today, and it's been quite challenging to make a cost-benefit analysis of extension. But we're making him earn every cent along the way, and trying to provide as much information as we can from trials and project back into the full agricultural system. We'll be running a webinar with results before the end of the project, so that'll probably be in the May-June period, and the project winds up on the 30th of June. We have some specific consultations that we'll be running with organisations or people that we feel maybe we haven't got all the information we want from them, or that we want to provide information to. And finally, we'll be developing some pretty in-depth case studies. So not routine case studies. They'll actually be very in-depth case studies of the experience of some of these people who've been involved in the project or how the project has affected them. So there'll be a range of people involved in that, so 6 or 7 case studies. So that's pretty much the project, and I've just been given the get off the stage sign from Cath. So Ruth, you're on, so I'll let you drive this. So welcome everybody, thank you very much, and just to finish off, your targeted people to be here today. So we could have had twice as many, but we actually wanted you here today, so it's very, very important to us to hear what you've got to say. So to reiterate what Cath said, everything you think is important. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian, and can I add my thanks for people travelling from all over Australia to be here today, and cross-sectoral, all different organisations, and how exciting it is that we're going to be hearing about the action that's been taken in the last couple of years around the trials. So my task right now is to give a little bit of just extra information about the things that aren't going to be a focus today, and also to provide the context for how important the trials are, that then leads us into hearing more about them. So one of the things that Ian just mentioned was a part of the project that related to professional development around particularly the private sector. And throughout the project map that Ian just outlined, we've been asking, whenever we came across farmers and advisors through the forums, through the surveys, we were asking people about their gaps in professional development, their needs, and the issues and challenges of their professional development. So we have quite a big data set behind us from the forums and from the survey about professional development needs in extension, but also amongst advisors and what farmers are seeking, and that's available if you're interested in following up there. From those forums and surveys, we mapped some of the findings against what was already being offered by the private sector itself in professional development, as well as what was available across universities and TAFE. And in this regard, it was fantastic to have the resources of APEN, who had conducted an audit of all the professional development available across Australia. So we mapped what farmers and advisors, or farmers' needs, and what advisors said they were doing, or current gaps, with what was available, and identified some areas of gap. And with that, we developed short online learning modules, 8 of them. These are their titles, of which are being offered to the people involved in the trials and people that are the stakeholders of the project to pilot these as basically market testing. Are these relevant? Do they fit a current need? Are they useful? Do they really help address your issues and build capacity? So that's underway and still going. We have some people in the room that I know have been involved in the piloting of them. We have the first 5 complete or nearly complete in terms of people doing them for 8 weeks. We have the last 3 that are going to be launched in the next week or so, and are seeking some pilot participants. So that's the marketing bit that I just do right in this second. So that's the modules. If you'd like to hear more, we have more information and you can follow up, because today is really focusing on the trials and what's been learnt and what's been achieved. And so I wanted to just explain a bit of background about where the trials fit in the bigger picture and how important they are. So like what I described with the modules, the trials have also come from talking to farmers and advisors in the forums and through what was observed in the national surveys of farmers and advisors. And it was quite shocking to see some of the results from the producers, and the summary of the results is available in your pack in the background paper. So that was the one that was shown in May. So anyone who was in the forum in May, you're very familiar with that data. My aim here is just to give you a taste of some of that and how it leads to the importance of the trials. So in that survey, farmers were asked about their level of confidence. So there was 1,000 producers across the country, quite a low margin of error at that scale when we look at age, sector, state, quite a good sample. That across the population, half of farmers indicated some uncertainty about their skills and knowledge for grappling with challenges in farming. And even less percentage, around an average of about 40%, said they always knew where to go for information and advice and support. And so the significance of needing a better system that supported the productivity and sustainability of agriculture was very stark. But then when we looked at who people were using and drawing on for information and advice and support, we found a diversity of people that are important in farm decision making. No surprise, and people in your own sector know a lot of this context, but to see it in a national picture, that 85% of farmers do use the information and look for that information from product resellers and farm input suppliers. So the orange here bar graphs are the percentage of farmers that say, yes, I use this source for information, advice or support. And you can see everybody is used, whether you're government, whether you're a fee-for-service advisor, whether you're a processing company. To some farmers, each is important. And the blue bar graph relates to the main source, where we challenge farmers to say, of all of these, who would be your main source? And so this data spoke to we have a diverse system now, and what we need to do is understand that there are this range of people that are important in farm decision making. And so that brings up questions about how well connected all these providers are to the RD&E system. What sort of information, advice and support are they providing? Because what we also found was that all of these providers were supporting practice change on farm. There was no monopoly on change, that whether you're a product reseller, farmers were noting the changes that they had made, the important changes they had made. So these are all the people that need to be engaged and involved. We also found out that demand is expected to increase. So we asked farmers about, or producers, how did they see this changing? And we have an average of 31% saying more or a lot more demand for information, advice and support. A huge 56% they're saying about the same. And some of the, I haven't got some of the other providers there on the right-hand side. It hasn't come up on the slide. But across many of the providers, this demand, increased demand is there. So a lot of providers, increased demand, yet we have a system in which the advisory sector doesn't necessarily see itself as being very well connected and knowing what's going on. So we asked what current level of involvement advisors, so this is 655 advisors, had in being invited to be kept up to date, in being involved in translating research, in having input to research priorities, or actually involved in design and development and delivery of extension. When we asked that question, only 14%, thereabouts, said, I am closely connected. But over 70% want to be more engaged, and 32% want to be a lot more engaged than they currently are in all of these areas. So a lot of demand, a lot of diversity, yet not a large diversity involved in these areas. And so when we then link that to the information producers and advisors gave us at the forums, it showed a number of key issues around advisor entry paths for new advisors into the private sector, about the growing importance of the supply chains and the advice in supply chains. What about the areas that were emerging as issues and there wasn't a big momentum and a big effort around, for instance, precision agriculture? So there was this area that we could see much increasing demand, but not a lot of capacity to really support it. And what about new areas of knowledge or complex areas of knowledge? What really was holding this together? And so that's where that provides the basis for what the trial's trying to achieve. It's about taking action, identified the issues, but now let's take some action to turn this around. Now, of course, you could say, well, we only have a couple of years. We have some small case studies, but this is how we try to link what we hear today, learn about today. It's trying to address these bigger picture issues. There's probably others that could be done or should have been done, which would be great to get from you, but how important these areas of action that we hear today, the extent to which they can progress and improve the issues that were found in the forums and the surveys. So that's the importance of today in the trials. And now I'm going to hand to Jana, who has led sort of the trial effort overall, as well as been involved in one of the trials as well in the project, just to give a very quick summary of those trials and the process for them.
Thanks, Ruth. So I'll be very brief because we'll hear a lot more about each of the trials in just a minute. But just to give you a quick overview of the 4 trial contexts that we arrived at as a result of the research and consultations that we've run as part of this project. So we had trial 1, which took a supply chain approach to R&D by working with processors in the meat and dairy sectors. Trial 2 developed an assessment framework for the application of precision agriculture for advisors. Trial 3 developed advisory pathways and developed professional development pathways together with a range of advisory companies and new entrants particularly. And then trial 4 was the knowledge trial that looked at connectivity in the system really and information flow. Now am I getting the... Yep. So whilst we'll hear a bit more about each of the trial approaches, of course, they were all based on a common methodology, which was collaborative action research. So obviously, all the trials started by establishing a shared interest in that particular trial context, and then worked through to get a mutual understanding of the current situation. When I say mutual here, it was really important to us to really explore and go deep into the complexity of the situation, which comes with the diversity of perspectives on that. And so we really wanted to preserve that, because that was also the rich source that we then sourced from to develop activities and try to come up with a model or a process that was able to enhance the current situation. And then we went through a process of reflecting on those actions. And so it's been a very dynamic process that's still going on with today. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.